Hello, Uriel from Ninja Bear Studio here. Welcome back. In this video, we'll start looking into the opportunity system to create a finisher move. This is another big topic, so we'll need a few videos to go over everything. First, we'll check the Contextual Animation module, which is the foundation for the opportunity system. Currently, Unreal Engine 5.4 is out, and the system is relatively new, so I like to start by introducing this functionality. I'll show you which components are necessary to work with the Contextual Animation system, how to prepare your animation montages, and then how to work with the two data assets for the system, the roles data asset and the contextual animation data asset. Also, keep in mind that since the system is experimental as of Unreal Engine 5.4, the contextual animation system and the opportunity system from Ninja Combat might change in the future. So let's get started. In the engine, the first thing I like to do is to show you the outcome. I'll press play and attack the enemy a few times until his health is low and he's stunned. We'll talk about stun a couple of videos ahead. Now if I press my primary attack again, instead of performing a default attack, my character performed the finisher move. Of course you could have a different input for that, and we'll cover this again when we are configuring the inputs later on. Now there's a lot going on there. Let me do it again so I can point some things out. First, the hero's position was adjusted to the precise location where it should be to start the attack. This was done via motion warping. Next, both characters are performing synchronized animations that were set up using the Contextual Animation system. The damage was applied via the usual melee scan, which we already covered before, but I'll show you an alternative to that in just a moment. And finally, a camera animation also played, and that one was created using the sequencer. Alright. Let's open the player character blueprint and add the required components for this. The first one is the contextual anim scene actor. This component must be added to all characters that can participate in a scene, so you need to add this one to your enemies too. The second component is the motion warping component. We'll talk a lot more about motion warping in a dedicated video for that. But right now, suffice it to say that motion warping is used to modify the root motion of an animation to reach and face a certain target. From the contextual animation system's perspective, the motion warping component is only needed by the attacker. But since we'll add motion warping to all characters performing attacks, I would also recommend you to add this component to all your characters. Ninja Combat has a specialized version of this component, so make sure to add the Ninja Combat motion warping component there. And, as we've done before, implement the get motion warping component from the combat system interface. I've already done this in my C++ class, so I'll just delete this for now. This is it for the character configuration. For this example, we'll need two animation montages, one for the attacker and one for the victim. There are a couple of things I'd like to show you in the way these animations are configured. In the attacker's animation, the first thing I'd like to show you is the motion warping notify state. This state will adjust the root motion to reach and face a certain target over the duration of the notify state. For now, there's no need to change anything in this notify state, and all we need to do is adding a proper name to it, execution warp. This name will be very important later. As for the melee scans, I like to give you some ideas on how to apply damage from an execution attack. In this animation, I have two impacts, one for the sword, one for the shield. So I thought it would be interesting to show you how to deal damage after each one of them, without applying fatal damage right away. In the first notify, I have a custom damage effect that will add to the pending damage the current amount of health from the target divided by 2. Then, in the second melee scan, I have yet another damage effect that does almost the same, but this time using all health left on the target. You can play around with things like that, but you can also use the opportunity damage notify. This notify can also use the honor or weapon as a damage source, but there is no scan of any sort here. It's just meant to apply a fatal amount of damage, usually based on the target's health or any other big number. This notify comes pre-configured with a fatal damage effect, which will always apply a damage for the total amount of health left in the target. This is useful if your execution is, for example, something magical that has no contact with the enemy, or if you don't need to be precise about each hit and just need to zero out the enemy's health. As for the victim animation, we only have things that we've seen before: a ragdoll notify, the death notify, and the loop section. Now let's finally look into the contextual animation system itself. The first asset we need is a role data asset, which is based on the contextual anim roles asset. This asset will define all participants in the animation, giving them a role. In our case, we have the victim and the attacker. I also marked both of them as characters, since these roles are meant to be performed by the player and enemy character blueprints, and I set the rotation yaw to -90 to match the rotation yaw in the character meshes in their own character blueprints right here. If there are other transform adjustments that you need for all your contextual animations, you can do so here as well, but keep in mind that you will most likely be reusing this asset across multiple contextual animation setups, so only adjust values that are common to all these animations. Let's move on to the contextual animation setup. Even though I already configured one of these before, I think it would be better if I created one from scratch, since I know this asset can be a bit intimidating at first sight. So let's create a new asset in the content browser. They're called Contextual Anim Scene and are located under Animation. In this editor, we have a preview window, a timeline, and the detail panel on the right that has global properties, and also properties related to the current animation track selected in the timeline. To get started, we need to select the roles asset that we just created. This tells the scene all of its participants. Then I need to select which participant plays the primary role. In this case, I want the player to adjust to the victim's position, which is why we even added the motion warping notify to the attacker, remember? So that means that the victim is the anchor here, and therefore the primary role. Now I can add my preview details. You can select any mesh that makes sense for your project for each role. Just make sure to select meshes that were the base for the animations. You can optionally select the animation blueprint that will be running when this contextual animation plays too. With that done, let's create an anim set. An anim set contains all animations that will be synchronized for all participants. In this window, I can type a name for this anim set and select the correct animation montages for the victim and the attacker. Once I confirm these values, the animations are added to my timeline. Both characters are on top of each other, so we need to adjust that first. I'll click the attacker track, and this will open the details for that animation on the right. Since I already know that this animation moves 200 units, I need to add the distance. And since the victim is the primary role, I want to add that distance to the attacker, because they are the one moving. And then for things to look right, I also need to rotate the victim 180 degrees so it's facing the attacker. At this point, the animations should be correctly synchronized. And if we hit play, the animations should pair up nicely. With these adjustments done, I can configure the warp point for this scene. This is the anchor point used by the motion warping notify to place the attacker at the correct location. Remember the name that we added to the notify, execution warp? This is where we'll need it. For the definition mode, I'll select primary actor, since we want the attacker to connect to the victim. But if you want to create something more generic, maybe because you want to reuse the scene for other characters with different shapes, then maybe you should use a socket instead. But let's keep it simple for now. Now if I click Update Warp Points, all these settings will be stored in the scene for this track. And then we're done. We'll revisit this topic again later, while implementing a backstab. But for now, this should be enough for the first finisher move. In the next video, we'll continue looking into the finisher attack and the opportunity system. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you soon.